Okay. All right. Round 3 now that the room's full. Or no, wait. We're waiting until 1:05.
Yeah, we're going to get 2 more notes.
Yeah.
So most of the overview, just for this talk, we're going to be talking about the development we've been working on and just like the process board and stuff. This is, we were hoping to have a sort of like intro to developing on the Deluge. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi, if you've noticed, here has been kind of bad. So our toolchain download system relies on like pip and things like that for downloading, and you can't currently access the servers. So we can share out the keys if you want, USB keys if you want them, but. Yeah,
they're not.
It's just building. It's never. You can't have.
It worked fine. I was here on Wednesday, the day before that, everything was working, and it was fine. But it just seems like the number of clients currently connected to the access points is just overloading everything.
All right.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. I've never been good at
we're trying to find ways to not sit here in silence.
Live fixing merge complex.
You could show this on the screen.
I could.
Do you have the correct cables?
You have an
HDMI
port over here.
Yep.
Is this going to crash if I do this?
Okay, there we go. So for
yeah, there's 2 more seats up front if people want to be in the spotlight a little bit.
Is that going to work?
Watching.
There we go.
We're replacing small talk with merge complex because we're in software.
Super thrilling.
Yep.
Actually, that's a good question. How many of you are like software engineers or like C++ understanders?
yes.
Oh yeah! Wow, that's way more than I was expecting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Maybe we can get some recruiting done. Your laptop's blocking the projector, by the way. All right, it's 1:05. The room is. There's one more chair if you want to. Yeah. We're all sitting down because we've been on our feet for like 2.5 days.
And I'm sure some of you have also been on your feet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to close the door and start?
Just like not all the way, but just like enough that we don't get the.
Like this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our little screensaver.
Mark fixing merge complex. Wait, how did you get a merge complex?
Sean adjusted the timing of some of the UI tests, and then I rewrote the system underneath it and changed the timings again.
Okay, cool. Excuse me? Is it waking up?
There you go.
Ah! Mark. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Do introductions for the 3rd time, but for real this time. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Catherine Whitlock, also known as Stellar Aria. I'm currently a student at Brooklyn College studying music technology, but I also do hardware and software development for the last 10 years, so.
I'm Mark Adams. I love Steak on Discord. In my day job, I teach computer engineering, but mostly DSP and control systems and not audio stuff.
Yeah. I'm Sapphire Arches on Discord. I work as a graphics driver engineer full time, and this much of the rest of the time, and then I'm also doing a master's degree in the evening. So lots of stuff going on.
I'm Björn, or more known as Friddle in the open source community, and I work full time with other open source projects and doing also the Deluge Firmware.
Shut the other ones out.
Mm-hmm. Is it what?
It's NeoVim, right?
NeoVim, yeah. So we're the people that made it, but there's 38 total contributors to the Deluge firmware, and a couple other core contributors that couldn't get here.
Yeah, and we have 2 managers for the team technically, and Jamie, who is paid by Synstrom.
Yeah, so none of us are actually paid by Synstrom, other than Synstrom paid for the booth here, so we all got to go to Superbooth. But yeah. I guess I'll go into the slides I made 24 hours ago. So we'll try to talk a little bit about sort of the background of the project, what we're working on. So like that's up through the 1.0 Amadeus release. What we're working on for 1.1 Beethoven. We were sort of hoping to have it stabilized for Superbooth, but like we do this in our spare time, so it sort of gets done when it gets done is the thing. If you want support, pay somebody. And then what we're planning on doing or at least some of what we're planning on doing for 1.2, tentatively named Chopin, but we'd like to have names of composers that aren't just like, European composers that have sort of already had their accolades. So if you know interesting composers from other backgrounds, that would be cool. Let us know. We try not to use names of people that are currently like alive and practicing because we don't want to sort of imply that they're involved in it or any sort of thing. Just
We also don't want to accidentally endorse someone that turns out to be racist or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Dead composers.
Yep.
Preferably. Sorry.
Tangent aside.
So talk a little bit about the hardware. So I think hopefully everybody in this room owns a Deluge or at least sort of knows what it is. But because we're going to be talking about firmware stuff, I thought it would be appropriate to go over some of the lower level details of what's going on. So the Deluge has 6 unbounded quadrature encoders, and those are directly connected to the CPU, which sort of leads to some interesting things where I'll talk about the CPU a little bit later, but we only have a single core. And so that means we have to make sure that we don't have anything that takes too long. Otherwise, we miss steps in the quadrature and then the encoder doesn't behave right. So I'm sure if some of you have been running nightlies at various times, your encoders have gone weird. And that's usually why. The pad grid and all of the LEDs and the other buttons are managed by a separate microcontroller. It's a PIC16F on the board. We don't have the firmware for that, but we sort of have the protocol because that is sort of like what the existing firmware did. And Catherine actually did a bunch of refactoring to make that more readable. We have 2 CV outs, which are on a SPI bus that's shared with the controller, or the display controller for the OLED. So that's part of how the OLED retrofit works, is it actually pulls the SPI bus out.
Sorry, I got like a pound of dust.
Yeah, super dusty out. We have 4 gate outs and then stereo audio in and out. The CV outs have the DAC I was talking about. Gate outs are directly connected to the CPU. I think there's some protection circuitry. And then the stereo audio is over a I2S bus, which is managed asynchronously. There's a peripheral that we feed. The internal mic and speaker are physically connected to the line in and phone outs respectively. So I know something that people ask about a lot is like, can we get more channels out? Not really with today's hardware. It's maybe possible with some external hacking and that sort of thing, but we also don't really have a ton of CPU headroom to actually make that work. So potentially...
A couple of the gate outs are actually connected to an SSI peripheral on the CPU, and so we've considered potentially adding like a secondary DAC peripheral that sticks into your gate outputs, and then we give you like 8 channels out via TDM. But it depends on the sort of like smoothing the circuitry that's inside it, because if you're like messing with the rise times and fall times and stuff with that serial interface, it'll be a bad time. So we'll see.
Yeah, so maybe, but not today. The display, it originally shipped with a 7seg, so the segments on the 7seg are controlled by the PIC, which means that actually in the OLED, the chip select line is actually controlled by the PIC, and then we have to do like DMA out the OLED data and then ask the PIC to turn the chip select off again, which causes some interesting stuff. The OLED version was announced about a year ago. I thought it was Superbooth. I should have checked that before I put it in the slides, but I didn't. So maybe that's a lie. 7seg owners can have their display upgraded. So one of the things we've added in the community firmware is 7seg emulation mode. So we try to keep the 7seg as like a first-class citizen. Try to make sure that we build workflows that keep working with the 7seg, because generally our goal with the community firmware is to try to keep it in the spirit of the official firmware, right? We don't want to dramatically change the workflow. Like, that's why people bought the device, and that's why we like it, right? So we're not trying to completely rewrite it. You could, because, the debug header is there, but it's a lot of work. I'll talk about that in a bit. So the CPU is a Renesas RZA1L. It's like a multimedia processor from 2013. It is quite slow compared to or even like a Raspberry Pi 3 is like, I don't know, 10 times more powerful or something. It's like, that's like a modern quad core. This is like an ancient Cortex-A with like a awful memory bus and all sorts of stuff.
So for reference, this is about a quarter of a Raspberry Pi 2.
Yeah, so it's a miracle that it can do as much as it can, basically. We have 3 megabytes of internal RAM that's shared for both the software and any voice control blocks. So part of the reason why we start calling after large numbers of voices is because we actually run out of internal RAM and we have to go to the external SD RAM, which is significantly slower. It's like 3 or 4 times longer for every memory access. So there's a 4 megabyte quad SPI flash that has the bootloader and the firmware on it, but we can't do XIP, like execute in place. The CPU supports it, but again, it's like that interface is almost 100 times slower than the internal bus. So you definitely can't put like audio code in it, and because we only have a single core, we can't really put other code in there either. So one of the things we'd like to do is do dynamic code loading so that we don't have to keep the entire software loaded all the time, but we don't have that working yet.
I've been looking into plugin functionality and how we would implement it, and actually the 4MS team has done some really amazing work lately that they've open sourced with their meta module, and so we're looking into how they're doing that for inspiration and stuff like plugins.
Yeah. So we also have the SDHC interface for our FAT32 SD cards. That interface is reasonably quick, but it's saturated at around 12 samples, and many SD cards do not like it when you do a lot of random reads. So you might not actually get that. We were actually talking to the M8 booth that's right next to ours, who we were talking to them about like what SD cards are good. So we might be able to do something there in the future. Yeah, so the software was open sourced in about a year ago, June of 2023. It was a single developer project for 8 years. So Rohan at Synstrom basically wrote the entire software stack himself. And that software stack was extremely well tuned when we got it. It is, there's a ton of like performance hacks in there. Some of them work and some of them just look like they should work, but don't. But one of the things is the Patreon page for a JTrace, which is a debug product from Sega that actually gives you cycle accurate, like what is the CPU doing. So hopefully we'll be able to squeeze a little bit more out of it in the future. And Rowan was very much learning C++ as he wrote the project. You can see sort of layers in the code of like as he got better as a software engineer and like improved his development practices, but there's still the core voice rendering code, if you're wondering why we haven't changed a lot, is like a single 2,000 line function that reuses variables all over the place. And it is very difficult to follow. So teasing that apart and refactoring it is something that I guess I'm particularly working on. It's like we want to have good tests for the voice code so that we can change it without breaking it. Right?
I've already tried refactoring like many of the macros that are used for the voice, and it ended up doing like one little tiny change that someone found, and we had to revert the entire like 4,000 line commit. So yeah, it's a little rough.
Yeah. So sort of getting into what we did as part of the open source effort, Aria Brunel, I think.
Brunel.
Yeah, she packaged a custom toolchain. So we actually ship, it's inspired by what's it called?
The Flipper?
Yeah, the Flipper Zero toolchain. So there's actually scripts in the repo that will download the correct ARM compiler version. It'll actually download the version of CMake we need and all sorts of other stuff. So on Windows, our process isolation isn't fully there yet. So if you know how the Windows registry works, come talk to us and fix it for us, please.
There's no one who knows.
Yeah. But yeah, the project as delivered was using like Renesas's IDE, which for a single developer project, I imagine is quite convenient because if you have like the proper tooling and stuff, like it's a nice integrated environment. But because it's a now an open source project, we switched to SCons and then later CMake. So it's sort of using more of the open source like build tooling that people are familiar with. Catherine did a bunch of file organization and formatting. As delivered, the software was about 300 C++ files in a single folder, and it was a little scary to navigate. So we did that. The other thing we did is we reformatted everything using Clang format, just because it doesn't matter what the formatting is as long as it's automatic and something checks it so that it's, it stays consistent, right? It just makes sure that even when we have novice contributors that like don't know exact indentation rules or like don't have good code aesthetic senses, you just push the button, it formats it, and it's fine, right? We tried to remove some of the more egregious undefined behavior in the software. There's a bunch of stuff that was very much using like C with classes or like weird C++ extensions that break between GCC versions, nominally to improve performance, but we're now a C++ 17 project, so we have ways to spell a lot of those tricks.
23.
20? Sorry. Oh, is it 23?
Yeah, we went in concepts.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We don't use much of it yet, obviously. But yeah, it's trying to make sure that people can write code in a way that is both performant and the compiler is at least required to interpret it a certain way, right?
We've done some pretty like serious tests using Compiler Explorer about like how things compile. So like even if there's like a few instructions that get added between certain snippets, we might use an older one instead of a newer one because it's just that important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe this wasn't clear from the CPU slide, but because we're sharing the code and our internal fast memory is all the same storage, we need to keep an eye on code size. So every byte that gets added to the firmware is a byte that can't be used for runtime audio data, right? Yeah, and we've done a bunch of like general refactorings, trying to apply some software engineering principles. Sort of talking about the original code quality, it's very much a C with classes project. It's not like, if you're afraid of like modern concepts and template-based C++ programming, there's none of that here, and there probably won't ever be too much of it because monomorphization, like the template expansion, is super bad for code size. There's a lot of go-tos in the code base that we try to sort of remove as we need to fix a bug in a function. Like we need to understand how it works, and it's sometimes easier to just rewrite it without the go-to, and then you understand how it works, and then you can fix the bug. There's a huge amount of global state, which isn't necessarily a problem on an embedded project like this, but it does mean that there's a lot of spooky action at a distance sort of stuff where like a lot of things are dependent on the current code context or like the current editing context, making sure that all of that works together. And there are quite a few like clever tricks that sometimes actually improve performance and many times are not, and just made the code less clear. So whenever we see those, we sort of test it to make sure that it's not actually doing anything and then rip it out.
It might have improved performance on the original compiler, like
Yeah,
GCC
so
8 or 9, but we're now like on GCC 13, and the compiler is quite a bit smarter about certain actions. So sometimes it just doesn't help at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our 1.0 release, I don't know, I imagine most of you are either familiar with it or running it. Yeah, so this added grid and automation views. Mark fixed a bunch of bugs related to the MPE support. And part of that was actually like emailing Roger Lin and asking him how it should work and how it works on the instrument and stuff. So I guess one thing I want to keep touching on is that like, this is a community project for the Deluge, but also like we want to be good open source citizens and try to make sure that like we're moving like software engineering and music technology forward without trying to like lock it down necessarily, because that might help you make money in the short term, but like in the long term, stuff like the mutable modules like are going to live forever, right? Because the software for them is available and hackable and that sort of thing. Yeah, so we added new keyboard layouts. There's new sound engine features. The filters are outside of the scary voice functions, so those are easy to hack on if you want to add filter models. We had a sticky shift. I don't know. This is like a tiny fraction of what's actually in 1.0. We have a change log if you want to look at exactly what's there. So what are we working on for 1.1? There's a new performance view similar to the like polyend, like you get a across the grid, you get a bunch of vertical like faders basically, and you can trigger different effects and that sort of thing. And automation views continue to get some updates. So now it works in audio clips. It doesn't in 1.0, and it works in Arranger as well. There's a new reverb model talking about mutable. It's based on mutable rings. Yeah.
People keep asking me if it's like from clouds, and Rings has a hidden like disastrous piece mode where it does chords, and one of the effects on it is a reverb. So this is actually from Rings, not from clouds.
Yeah. There's now per track compressors. So this might change the sound of some tracks a little bit, but it shouldn't be noticeable.
They're off by default.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the per track compressors are off by default. Yeah, there's a bunch of new ARP features inspired by the ASM Hydrosynth. So there's stuff like rhythm and random modes and that sort of thing. There's a new MIDI follow mode. So instead of having to manually map clips, you can enable MIDI follow, and then whichever clip you're currently looking at receives the MIDI data, which is pretty helpful for live performance. And there's a whole bunch more stuff. There's probably the changelog for 1.1 is probably twice the size of 1.0. So there's a huge amount of stuff that we've put into it. Yeah, release schedule, I sort of touched on this before we got into it, but this is a community project and we do this in our spare time. So it's ready when it's ready. We wanted to have 1.1 ready for Superbooth, but people keep finding bugs, which if you find a bug, please tell us about it. We'd way rather hear about it on Discord or on the Facebook group or something than have it kill somebody's performance, right? We are building an instrument that people use live, so we don't want it to crash on them randomly. And a bunch of us do actually, not me personally, I don't know how to perform, but people in the dev team do actually use it live. So yeah, we're well aware that we need to keep it as stable as possible. Yeah, and our compensation is the Patreon does not go to us. It goes to paying for tools and stuff like the booth here. So yeah, we get to be here, but we don't get paid directly. Yeah, if you were to pay people directly for the amount of work that has gone into this, it would be significantly more than what the Patreon currently.
This has been a fantastic vacation, though.
Germany's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are we planning on doing for 1.2? The tentatively named Chopin, as I said, tell us about composers that aren't just Western Europe, as long as they're dead. Yeah. Yeah. We don't want live composers because we don't want to imply either that we're endorsing them or they're endorsing us or that sort of thing. So Bfretl stuck an entire DX7 inside it, inside our voice engine for 1.2. It still needs a whole bunch of UI work, but it's already usable and relatively stable. So yeah, Mark's completely rewritten the underlying scheduling algorithm to hopefully help us get more predictable performance. I know that's something that people sort of have a hard time understanding of, when I'm adding stuff, when is it actually going to cause problems? Because the Deluge doesn't have any explicit limits. It's all just sort of implicit in terms of what can you do before important voices start getting called. Yeah, and looking.
If anyone is familiar with Rust or JavaScript, my end goal here is to have an async function that you can wrap around things, and they'll just run eventually when there's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and beyond 1.2, we want to do more architecture work. Like I mentioned earlier, the project is very much a C with classes thing that was written by somebody who was learning C++ at the time. So what Rohan was able to squeeze out of the thing is incredible, right? But it's not how a software engineer would have done it. And there are ways to make the firmware just as performant but easier to hack on. And that's sort of where we want to go. One of the big projects is replacing the whole USB stack. It's currently using their Renaissance vendor code. I'm sure at least some of you are embedded developers and are aware of the quality of vendor code. So yeah, we want to replace that. We want to replace some of the other systems that are a little crustier, pull the voice code apart, add tests so stuff doesn't break and we're not aware of it and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. In terms of final notes, come hack with us on GitHub or hang out on Discord. All of us are maybe a little too online. So we'll be around to answer questions and sort of get you pointed in the right direction. In terms of like making this a workshop, we were hoping to do some live, like if you have your laptops and your deluges, but I screwed up downloading the firmware images and the Wi-Fi here sucks. So
It's actually really good in this room.
Huh?
In this one room?
Yeah.
In this one room? Yeah.
I wonder if it's because the access point isn't used because we're in like an isolated part of the building.
And also people don't have the laptops.
But yeah, if you have a laptop and you want to get set up, we've tried to make it literally as easy as possible. Clone the repo, and then there's a tool in it called DPT that he mentioned, and you just run it, and it's supposed to set everything up for you. The one note is none of us use Windows, so sometimes the Windows one breaks. Oh, you do use Windows?
I use Windows.
Okay, she doesn't fix the bugs.
But yeah, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And then, I don't know.
Yeah, if we want to.
I have a bunch of USB keys I can hand out.
Go through the code. Yes, help. Yes.
Yeah, I have one question regarding organization and the other one is technical.
Mm-hmm.
How do you agree on new features and what this project implies?
You know, we wrote a lot about how we were going to decide, but it's now turned into a...
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
What were you saying?
Sorry, I was asking about how do you decide on what features to implement
Yes.
and what the project is moving towards. You know, how does participation look like?
Okay.
Yeah, so we wrote a bunch of guidelines. So the UI guidelines we're sticking to pretty well. The guides on how new features get added, we wrote a bunch of stuff, but really this has turned into a do-ocracy. So the people who do the work choose the features.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, we haven't really had people trying to merge things that don't feel like they belong in the deluge, right? The deluge itself is so complicated that there's already a bunch of spaces in the feature matrix of like, oh, this should be here and it's not, and somebody is annoyed that it isn't, then they'll come and merge it.
Well, you have little headroom, as you said. So at some point, there's only so much you can run at the same time.
Oh, we have so much room to make it smaller though.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Like the community, I don't know if you guys have compared bin sizes, but it's like 200 megs smaller, or 200 kilobytes smaller than the official one at the moment, despite all the new features.
And we do want to implement a module system at
Yeah.
some point, so not everything needs to be a single binary log with every feature. So you
Yeah.
can add the plugins.
The second one is specifically, it's just out of curiosity, why can't the FM engine do anything besides science?
So currently, it's because it's all done in Simd, and we haven't added the features for doing more. Like it was very much optimized very strongly for doing sine waves.
There's no
So-
hard barrier to...
Correct.
Yeah,
and
but-
in fact,
We do have per op feedback. So if you turn that up, you get something that looks largely like a triangle at about 15 and a saw at 25.
Yeah.
So you can use that to make the shapes. But yes, I have large plans of totally overhauling the FM engine in the next couple months. Because as a, my main job is teaching. So from last week up until September, I have a lot of time on my hands. So
Yeah, and especially now that we'll have the DX7 to handle all of your sine needs, doing more complicated stuff with the built-in engine.
yeah.
Though interestingly, the built-in FM engine is currently the lightest weight synth.
But the DX7 didn't have filters, didn't it?
It's in the subtractive, so actually you can filter it.
Didn't have
Yeah.
DX7.
Yeah.
and I haven't enabled it yet, but all the code now exists to enable filters in the Deluge FM synth too.
Is that just an open for like a month, right?
No, I did all the back work and then never did the PR to enable
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I've heard about it for a while.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One day I'll write those 2 lines of code.
Yes. Are there any other questions? We can sort of talk about other like technical aspects if you have any curiosities or anything.
Is there any automated tests you mentioned being worried about breaking performance?
Yeah, so the tests run largely on the host computers, so we don't actually run tests like on the deluge itself, which sort of limits us in terms of the kinds of things that we can test, because like we can't test bugs that like would occur with an ARM CPU because they're running on x86, for example. So like the tests that we have written are unit tests for the allocator in the deluge is completely custom. It's actually we were doing dynamic allocations pretty much constantly when sample streaming, and then those dynamic allocations are cleared and more are done in order to continue streaming a sample seamlessly. And that is very complicated to keep track of. In fact, Rohan's system was originally done in sort of like a ref counting system. I actually came from doing garbage collectors and reference counting in college. And so part of what we did the first few months is worked on decomplexifying the way that this allocation and what did he call them? Like reasons for keeping things around was kept track of and then deallocated dynamically. And doing that required that we wrote a ton of unit tests just for that code so that we could be like, yes, this will disappear, this memory will disappear when it is no longer needed under these circumstances. Mm-hmm. And that actually, like, being able to test that was really helpful because it meant that we could remove certain problems of like memory leaks and things like that may have been occurring that we weren't aware of until we fixed them. I personally also have been writing like a very small tests for like little tiny components as I go through and like add things to the code base, just because I come from a TDD BDD background, and so I've written like an RSpec like syntax for C++ before, and I really like using RSpec, and so being able to test things at least in units on a host is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of the challenge is that the software architecture is currently very much a big ball of goo, so it's very difficult to write tests for something as deeply embedded in the system as the voice code. So that's sort of my holy grail of like, write tests for the voice code so we can pull it apart, make it easier to work on. But the problem is that it gets into like, if you want to modify the voice code, you need the time stretcher, and the time stretcher currently directly calls a library that only works on Neon ARM CPUs. And so now we need to put a abstraction layer there, and that abstraction layer can't cause performance on the device itself. But then it's like, there's literally hundreds of things like that where it's like 1 or 2 steps away from the thing you actually want to test is something that's directly poking a register on the device or like directly using something that's ARM specific. And so, yeah, I don't think this software never worked off of the device itself, and trying to teach it how to do that is sort of a lot of work that we're doing piecemeal as we get to it.
So some background for the Deluge, like even before, you can look through the code and see like it was originally based on a teensy. And so the code that Rohan wrote was originally like a MIDI sequencer on a teensy, but then he moved it to this because he needed a more powerful processor and had the dev kit for it. But since then, it's just completely only been on that dev kit, on that hardware. And so there's been no ability to sort of port things and move them around.
So you were mentioning you're working on like a scheduling system, basically.
Yep.
Like a async runtime.
Yep.
And you did make a reference to similar to Rust. So are there any ideas of actually improving?
Actually implementing it in Rust?
You might say that you could do just the minimum work of doing the actual async runtime part, which you will need to do for Rust, right? But then you could have everything else. Yeah,
it was more of a reference to the syntax. I would love to have had this entire thing written in Rust, but it's like a...
But I mean, it's by now the embedded Rust stuff is... Like, I've done it a lot on
yeah.
So microcontroller, you just miss, like, linking in the Rust code with the embedded C is like... Works super well.
We'll have it
so
eventually.
I do embedded Rust
Right.
for my day job. Well, I'm trying to. I'm trying to start new things in Rust. I still have a lot of legacy C around. But it's not really in a state where you can actually link against this code base in a meaningful way. There's no syscall support. There's no real exported functions. Like it's a long way from there. But one day maybe it'll be extensible in Rust.
The current state of the Deluge firmware is kind of not there.
Yeah. So Mark and I are both card-carrying members of the Rust Evangelism Strike Force, so it will be coming eventually, but maybe not that soon. Catherine needs to be convinced still. She had a bad time with USB.
I mean, specifically on async stuff, because I mean, this is what.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you have the nice async stuff, something nice in C or C++, you're still. I mean, the reason we want Rust is because it goes bad, right?
Yeah.
Even if you have the good facilities in C++, it's still more easily goes bad. So
It does. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Part of the reason I strongly push for like more modern code style and like library usage in our C++ stuff is so that people are less likely to do things that have gotchas or unbounded information. I personally I've been doing C++ for, like I said, since like 2011, 2012, and so it is my main language, and the changes that have come from like C++ 11, C++ 17, C++ 20 are just huge advances in terms of like certain things. Just using shared pointer and unique pointer properly can like remove a lot of the issues you have with like raw dangling references and things like that. And I would say that like Rust borrow checker can do amazing things, but you can also do similar things in C++ just by being a little bit more careful about stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, because of the community aspect, I guess the point of making the ASIC system nicer is also for more people to be able to write more difficult code.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've seen, I've done C++ for like, I don't know, 18 years now or something. But what I've seen is that Rust enabled a very large group of people who would never write async native code.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can check out the scheduler, but it is, a bunch of void pointer shenanigans to make it work.
Yeah. Anyway, but I mean, of course, you guys have already. I just wondered what this was, because I mean, if you're talking about doing async thing and you're referencing Rust, then there must be a reason why.
Yes, it's that I like Rust. I like async. Like I do control stuff, and especially with RTech, being able to run a hard real-time thing on one core and then just have normal async on the other is so nice for usability.
Unfortunately, we only have one core.
Yeah, we do also need one core. So.
Any other things? Any other just curiosity things that you would like to know that you could maybe ask us while we're here? Yeah.
How do you decide on user interface changes or which function goes where? I think this is a difficult point.
Yeah. So we have weekly meetings actually. We have meetings on Discord. We used to have them on Zoom every Sunday. And one of the things we talk about is when people submit new features that potentially change the user interface, what is the best way to integrate it in a way that is already Deluge-like? And so we actually had a pretty strong conversation about the best way to integrate automation view. And now it's clip. It's just pressing clip and clip will flash now, just the same way that song will flash for arranger mode. But originally that wasn't how things were working, and we were trying to figure out what the best way to do that kind of integration was.
Yeah.
Or for example, pushing keyboard to pull up the performer when you're in clip overview.
Yeah, and even then, so the automation view had some feedback, and also my personal opinion is that in the first release it didn't feel well integrated. So we actually added a second way to get into it. So now, if you open up a normal editor, then you can just tap clip from there and you're straight into it, and then tap clip and you're back in your editing view. So now it's very nicely integrated into how things used to work. So as much as possible, we're aiming to try and maximize consistency. We know the UI is a convoluted mess, but once you sort of get the logic, it's usually consistent. Yeah. So that we're sort of aiming to keep it that way.
Yeah. We also have a lot of really vocal users that have been using the Deluge for sort of the nice thing about coming to a project that already has an established user base and functional software is that we don't really have a choice in a lot of ways about how to define stuff. It's people expect the system to work a certain way. They've been using it for 5+ years and it works that way. And so when stuff doesn't feel like it's native or integrated well, people will complain about it, and then we'll try to find a way to make it better.
And that's not to say that we don't want to make UI or UX improvements or changes. If there are things that are pretty hard to do, just doing certain shortcut chords is you need 3 or 4 fingers for certain things. That's really complicated and not really usable.
Yeah.
So we're looking to do how things can be improved that way. I know I personally would like to improve the screen and the sorts of information that are available on it, because currently it's just menus and things like that. But the ability of having graphics means that you can show information that is so much more easily understood. A filter can just be shown as a filter sweep and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and we have users like on the Discord. I think one guy literally just has one hand, so it's like sometimes we'll be talking about some new keyboard combo, and he's like, "I literally cannot do that." I don't know.
so there are accessibility
Yeah.
concerns.
Yeah,
that
and
we're also
actually,
considering.
comes up a lot with sticky shift too, because some people want it to only apply to the shortcuts, but it's also an accessibility thing. So if we start picking and choosing where it applies, then it gets confusing, and if you only have one hand, then suddenly there's a bunch of things you can't do.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I say complaining, which sort of has negative connotations, but it's like we'd way rather know that something is not working well than just people silently stewing and being upset. Right?
Yeah.
So,
And honestly, so go.
No, you go.
We have like it's great that so many people are willing to like discuss things and give feedback and like say that, oh, this isn't working properly for me or my workflow, because that is really, really useful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
But if you do want to complain, please complain on a Discord, because that's where we all hang out. If you complain on Facebook, we only once it hits like
I think it's
150
Sean.
comments,
Yeah.
someone will share it to us.
Sean is the one who's always on Discord and will catch things, but none of the rest of us are really on Facebook rather, and none of the rest of us are really on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're all on Discord.
I mean, just keep in mind we're volunteers doing this for fun, so like we don't really owe you anything, but also we do want to.
We do like we want to make this project something that can be continued.
Yeah.
And like leave a lasting legacy. Like Rohan absolutely made an incredible, like amazing product, and what we want to do is show like what can be done further, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How far can you take this crappy multimedia processor from 2013? Pretty far, it turns out.
It's pretty far. Like the fact that it has neon was not something I was expecting going into this project. You get like 4 lanes of 32-bit. Like
single cycle pipeline multiplies. It's
yeah,
pretty good.
I wrote a whole library just so that we can do like more neon stuff in a more like simple way, which is hopefully going to be more. I've only used it one place, and it's for the reverb LFOs. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to use it in more places and like squeeze a little more CPU out of things. So
I think the Waller Blofeld has like a 140 megahertz Motorola.
yeah,
And it's considered a fairly okay synth.
are they doing like integer? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Are they doing like integer synthesis and stuff
I mean,
like
I
that?
don't know, but like when I heard what's in it, I'm like, it's how is
Yeah,
it?
but it's only 8 voices. People complain that we only do like 60.
Only 60. How could you?
It's only a
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, we've actually gotten like comments. I know Tim from Dirty Wave was talking to us about like Sapphire mentioned about sample streaming and stuff like that, because the M8 can do 8 tracks and stuff, and it has sample streaming limitations. But what Rohan did was like keeping track of things in order to constantly stream from the SD card. The fact that you can stream 15 files from an SD card on this processor is insane to me, because like you're just doing so much, and even it's like interleaved in such a way that you can probably do like a little like it sounds like more.
Mm.
There's a question. You say 15, that's the maximum. 15 streams.
15, yeah, direct, like at the same time.
Stereo files or
Yeah, that is literally if we are able to perfectly schedule everything and fully saturate the SD read. Yeah, it's 15 stereo, 44.1 kilohertz.
I think I made a test because I like to do with loops, and I think I made a test, and I think I made more than that.
Well, so
It's
if
on
they
this.
Oh, they did it all in the original version.
Yeah.
So a lot of the
So
time.
I have to confess, I'm still on the original version.
So you can play more. It's if a sample's short, it'll be fully in memory, and then it doesn't have those limitations.
Yeah, it's already cached.
But if you're playing, like if you
loops, quite long loops, so 10 minutes loops.
you can play 15 10-minute loops. Check the math maybe. Look at mono or lower sample rates. Oh yeah, so mono you get 30.
it's 4100.
But yeah, there's a lot of tricks to keep things cached. So even if I forget how much we can store.
This is the reason stuff, right? So if it caches things and
Yeah,
there's reasons to keep things around,
What bit
it'll
depth?
just keep it in
16
memory.
or-
I think 16.
Yeah, so we can cache like 7 minutes of audio or something. So it generally works pretty well. Oh, especially if you have, depending on how your SD card's formatted, it can also vary a lot. Because what really kills us is seek time. If you have small clusters, so they're all over the SD card, then it drops. If you have a couple of giant clusters, then your storage is really inefficient, but we can read it quickly.
Yeah. So SD cards are very much optimized for sequential read, sequential write, because they mostly go into like video cameras and stuff. So once you actually start reading data, you're fine and happy, but sometimes the seeks can be a little slow. Yeah, but that was what we were talking to him about. So
yeah, and of course this is the reason why like samplers like the SP404 or like the Digitact and stuff have their really fast onboard flash storage, so they can just constantly read things. We don't have that. We have the SD card. So
plus, at least like you try to do more. Like even the new PolyN Play, you get 8 streaming tracks and that's it. Same, the new Digitact.
Digitact's 16 stereo.
Oh, it's 16 now. Yeah,
16 stereo. 16
yeah. 8 on the old one.
Yeah.
We're all very nerds, so we will ramble forever. Yeah.
Any other little tidbits?
As I first time scratched the head of this power today, this morning, is there a way to see that is the limit of this?
Yes, in the beta, and so which will be released next week, hopefully. But yeah, so now as soon as voices have to get dropped, the play button is just going to flash once, so you can see exactly where a new song is struggling and fix it from there. We also added a ton of little things in the current beta to help manage it better. So like by default now, any synth tracks you have will have an 8 voice limit, and as soon as it goes over, it'll call 1. And that stops a lot of problems, because one of the big things that I've noticed in songs people send us complaining about is that they'll have like super long releases, but the sample has actually stopped playing. So it's taking up resources while not making any sound. So now this just kind of stops it early. So most people, I've yet to see anyone actually complain about this 8 voice limit, and it's been there for 2 months. So, but if it is a problem, you can turn it off in the menu now. So, but that's helped a lot of it. And then I forget, there's a couple other tricks to try and increase it a little bit. But the beta is definitely, you will get more in the beta than you did in the first community release. It should now be comparable to official version 4.1.4. Not the earlier ones, but that's not entirely our fault. If you go and check the Deluge forums from when 4.1 first came out, you will find that that's where all of the complaints started. So we just inherited those.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're going to have to build like a Deluge test manager to see what's
So part of the reason we want the new scheduler is so that we can have more. So the existing multi-threading system is very much cooperative. So there's a bunch of stuff like, if you look at the FFT library, the code's been hacked so that every 64 times through the iteration, it'll go do some audio rendering, right? And so we want to, the scheduler is, and I think remains fully cooperative.
Yeah,
so
it's managed cooperative. So it'll let everything run cooperatively, but if it starts taking too long, it'll start running it less often. So now if someone puts in some code that breaks UI rendering, audio will still work fine.
Which is important, because I do that. I break the UI.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
It's very easy to break things right now, but we're working.
But yeah, slowly getting better.
Yeah, first I wanted to say thank you to all of you already. We had a chat, and
Yeah.
I think you've done really amazing work as a user of the Deluge. It's just been a pleasure to see what you've been putting into it, and I think it's been running like a really wonderful project for 1 year. The amount of updates, communication with this, it seems very, even if you say that you're not keeping up to date with documentation and release notes and all this, I think you're doing a tremendous job. So yeah, that's really nice. And I think you're underselling yourself a bit also when you keep mentioning like how slow you are, how it's gonna, I mean, what's been really, it's pretty amazing what's been added of new features. And the only time I submitted a bug, I did do it in Discord though, not on Facebook, and I did it in the evening, like nighttime before going to bed, and Europe time zone, and next morning when I woke up, it was fixed. I downloaded new. I think it was because you already sort of.
Oh no, that is like ideal. Yeah, because if you submit around 9 o'clock European time, then it's getting right when I'm finishing my day job and switching to looking into that.
I think it was changing the sync speed on the reverb. That sort of if you did it in one direction, then it just crashed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Sorry.
How you fix it or something?
Yeah. I was messing with the delay. I rewrote part of the delay so that it was like refactored out of the rest of all of the FX were in like one big blob thing, and I tried to pull out the delay because I want to add more delay models, like an analog tape delay model and stuff like that. So yeah.
I really love the new sync modes with triplets and modules and everything. So yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
I use the
think around
triple dip all the
stuff.
time.
I had one question also, apart from just wanted to give you some praise for all the work.
We love the praise.
Maybe some of the
We'll take
other ideas. Like I'm not a C++ developer. I work in this field and I've done work, but there are other ways if one wants to help or get involved with the project. Or
so
like tooling around or other ways you can help. I'm already supporting a Patreon, so glad to hear. But if I want to get the
Do you
So
know
if you are
web
familiar-
stuff?
Yeah.
We need. This is sort of an eternal struggle with all open source projects, right? Is we always need people who can contribute to documentation. And one of the things we want to do is build a like interactive user manual. So part of the work I'm doing, I tend to end up hacking on a lot of like under the covers stuff. But part of the work I'm doing is trying to convert all of the menu system into something that can generate a machine readable definition of it. So it's always in sync with what's actually on the device. And also we can put that on a web page somehow and like have people be able to click and navigate the menus. And because the Deluge is not an easy device to learn, and especially as we continue to add features to it, we have to squirrel it away in even more obscure parts of the UI as we're sort of the main control surface is all taken already, right? So trying
to get to discover new hidden gems.
Yeah.
Even like I learned new things at Superbooth. So
That's great. Another is there's the Discord. That's the best way of like asking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that for the C and C++, there are different GitHub issues that are marked as that are GitHub friendly.
Yeah.
In quotation marks, but these other ideas that you gathered them somewhere like this site, like this kind of document.
Yeah, so we have a separate repo called Deluge Web, which is where we're sticking in web apps that are getting developed to help with the Deluge. So like there's one already called the Deluge client. So it partially does debugging stuff over MIDI for helping developers, but also does an OLED screen emulation. So if you don't have an OLED, you can hook it up and pretend you do.
Pretend you have an OLED, yeah.
And we'll plan to add new things there in the future, I think.
Yeah. In terms of like a coherent place for like larger projects or coherently having somewhere to discuss stuff, it's mostly the Discord. There's like a feature chat forum and stuff.
So,
but yeah, larger projects we don't really have a great way to manage right now.
GitHub itself is kind of, there are other projects that have problems with feature requests and like upvotes and keeping track of those things on GitHub because it isn't a great place for it. Most like companies and stuff end up using third-party tools that connect into GitHub for doing that, and like we don't really want to pay for services like that. I mean, we cut out of our Patreon that money, but it's not a great use of it, we don't think. We have the discussions in GitHub, so like you can go on a discussion and talk about features that you want, and people can upvote those, and so we like people can go in there and see, oh, like I have a free weekend, do I want to try and work on something, hack on something? And you can like select a feature out of there and try working on it and stuff like that. I'm going to add on a little bit more to the web stuff. We kind of have a holy grail of like wanting to have like a website that can help like update your Deluge or like back it up before you update it so that you don't just lose things if that happens. If like your Deluge crashes. But like, yeah, that's a big hope too.
Yeah. There's always stuff. The tooling around the Deluge is definitely something that can improve, and especially now that the core firmware is open source. It's like if you want to that's one of the things that Jamie Faye is working on a lot. Is like she's starting way in the guts and trying to work her way outwards to try to build a better, try to improve Deluge Commander and that sort of thing. If you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Do better sample management, with similar to Overbridge, I think is Electron's thing.
And if you don't know C++, that's not a huge barrier. I mean, Sean, who did automation view and performance mode and stuff like that, didn't know C++.
Yeah, so 1 year ago, he knew a little bit of JavaScript.
Yeah.
He's actually an accountant.
He's an accountant and he uses Excel for almost everything. And so he did all of the color calculations for how performance view looks in Excel. And so we're more than happy to help people onboard if you're interested in learning how to code.
We've trained Sean to make smaller PRs, so
yeah.
All right.
Scary monsters.
Yeah. But yeah, so short-term ones, we have a forum on Discord that they can go in, but things do disappear in there. Long-term ones can sit in the discussions on GitHub, and we can sort them, which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know the LASEN one. I might take a look at that.
Yeah.
Cool.
We have, I think we actually have this room for the rest of the day, so.
But we're not holding you hostage.
Yeah, you can all.
So if you feel at any point that you,
we will answer questions forever.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to meet Reza, he's manning the booth. If you watch him perform on the Deluge, it is mind blowing.
Yes.
We're
developers. Yeah. He's the one who uses it all the time.
Yeah, I watch some clips and play over it with a little instrument, and I feel good about myself. And then I watch Reza, I was like, wow, I suck at this thing.
Yeah, he's also the one who keeps our UI ideas in check because he helped design the 7-segment emulator font and stuff like that, so that it looks right now. Any other things? Yes, no, maybe. No. Okay. So yeah. We're sort of closing it out here, I think. Thank you so much for coming, guys.
Yeah.